Awesome. Thank y'all so much for coming. Um, Welcome to the Changemakers panel. We'll start with introductions for me and Emily, who will be your moderators today, and then we'll start introducing the panelists. So I can start. My name is Cherese. I'm a third year counseling psychology student at the University of Illinois. I use she, hers pronouns, and I'm really excited about the panel today.
Thank you, Cherese, for getting us started. Hi, everyone. I'm Emily. I'm a second year counseling psychology doctoral student at the University of Miami. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm also very excited to be here.
So now we'll just introduce the panelists. We'll name them and have them introduce themselves. So I can start. Our first panelist is Dr. Della Mosley, who's one of the co-founders of the Wells Healing Collective. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, Dr. Della?
Sure, thank you. Thank y'all for bringing us together, for organizing this panel, and to the audience for being here. My name is Dr. Della. I use the pronouns they, them, or she, her. And I run a nonprofit called the Wells Healing Center and also a for-profit business called the Blafem Healing. And I'm a consultant and a recovering academic still. And this is my cat Gentry, who you'll see all night.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Della. Our next panelist is Andy Lee. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thanks so much, Emily. So my name is Andy. I'm a sixth-year doctoral student in clinical community psychology here at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. My research right now centers healing, belonging, and liberation. I'm just so happy to be here. Happy to answer further questions also about like navigating grad school, building coalition with other folks of color, just to kind of survive. And any questions folks have about kind of moving through the check boxes. So like internship, that's something I just did to get to the next step. So just really looking forward to being here with you all today.
Hello, Andy. So up next we have Dr. Candice Hargons, who is an associate professor at the University of Kentucky, as well as a co-founder for the Center for Healing Racial Trauma.
Hey, y'all. So happy to be here with you today. I guess we're giving an overview. My works, it centers sexual wellness and liberation, all with the love ethic. And I'm currently serving as interim department chair in the Educational School and Counseling Psychology Department at the University of Kentucky. And I am transitioning from the founder of the Center for Healing Racial Trauma to thinking about the Center for Global Majority Wellness and expanding the frame.
Thank you so much. And our last but not least, Dr. Holder, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to express my gratitude to the committee for inviting me to be on this panel tonight. I also wanted to give a land acknowledgement because I'm currently on the University, of Miami campus, which is in modern day Coral Gables on the occupied territory of the Seminole, Taino, and Tequesta tribes. I also wanted to give a labor acknowledgement to all of the Black and Brown bodies who stewardship that we are benefiting from by occupying this land. So as I mentioned, I'm at the University of Miami. I am a staff psychologist in their counseling center. And recently I've had a personal shift in the way that I practice psychotherapy to lean into more non-Western psychotherapeutic practices, namely Indigenous and land-based practices, which I've gotten permission to be trained in and to utilize, which prompted both a colleague and myself to set up a radical healing circle for the BIPOC community here on campus so that we can reacquaint them to cultural practices practices germane to them that offer healing and restoration and reduce harm. So I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you so much. So we have some structured questions. Folks that are here, if you have your own questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A and we'll get to them as they come. But our first question is, how do you balance being trained in the academia that upholds many systems of oppression and being a change maker / activist? Whoever would like to start.
Okay, I can kick us off. I don't know if there is a balance. I don't know if there is a balance, but I do feel like academia has been like a really good training ground for becoming a change maker, right? Like, so there may not be a balance. You may be overtaxed because of the way that white supremacy and anti-Blackness and all the systems of oppression show up in academic spaces, but that means there's also really unique opportunities to practice learning how to squat up, learning how to debate, learning how to speak truth to power, learning who your comrades are versus the folks who are just wanting to get on a paper or be a part of something to say they did it or whatever, right? Like, this discernment is that, like, all of that is a skill. And so I think that because there's so much extra learning, like, that becomes its own sort of curriculum in a way. And so there's not a balance, but it's a really powerful training ground that's really useful to being a change maker, because those are the things that we're using as we're, trying to survive in this world and create safety for ourselves and for the folks who we're doing our work for. So I think, I don't know, I guess the only other thing I would add is that even though there's not a balance, I think we can strive, and I hope that students will strive. I wish that I had strived harder and did a better job at trying to find harmony or some kind of equilibrium as you do the work. But it's an impossible ask in many ways, and because we're like being asked to fix and create wellness and balance within a system that is built on it not existing there. So I use it for the training experiences as much as I can and try to find balance now, but I just acknowledge how hard it is too.
I wanted just to build off of that. Oh, go ahead, Dr. Hargons, if you want to go first.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm still in the academy right now, so 6th year, right? And then my last year to get my degree is this doctoral internship. So I think first of all, it was hard enough to get into grad school and then find out that, like, oh, by the way, you don't get your degree when you finish your dissertation. You have to do a whole nother training year where you relocate your whole life, right? And so I think something about this question of like balance being trained in an academy, I think one lesson I would hope to impart on others that has helped me is that the academy will never love us back. And I think letting go of that has been really helpful for me. And why I say check boxes very intentionally is that, like, I don't think a dream for myself is to remain in the academy. I think there are so many people that have poured into me and shaped me, and like I'm so grateful for it. But I think in terms of my values, that was something I learned the hard way earlier on, of like, I don't belong here. This is not how I understand my role in terms of the work I want to do. And so I think that shift of the academy will never love us back, but what I'm doing here is I'm getting all the knowledge that I can to share with my community so no one else has to go through this. That is one way that, like, I think mental load wise lets me reframe. So like, and that other piece of like, good enough, like, this is good enough, kind of helps in terms of refocusing the energy towards the work that I want to do, the community I want to be building, the people that I want to be working with, or saying yes to projects that I want to be doing.
Yeah, I'll build on both of the points that y'all made. For me, the balance is that I'm going to create the environment that I want. And so I understand the weight of that. And I have to balance the weight of that with my own needs and my own desires. But for me, I think my place in the academy is to be transformative, to show up in love, and to invite people to act like they love themselves. And that invitation, first to love yourself, and then to the surplus, to come to the people who are most targeted and marginalized in the academy, is one strategy I use. So practically, it looks like being the type of mentor, being the type of chair, being the type of faculty member that loves the people around them, and that, you know, coming into the space and knowing that even if it wasn't designed for me, it's mine now. So I'm gonna make it what it needs to be so that I can be well and thrive. And when it's not, I'm gonna name that, right? Like if it's not within my power in this moment to do, or my capacity in this moment to do, to name that, like, hey, this is something that's sickening, actually is toxic. This is something that I notice and I'm naming, and I'll come back to it when I have time, but also never to do it alone. So not being somebody that lacks the humility to believe that I'm the only change agent in a system, that people been doing this work before me, you know, and they will do it after me, and to be in community with them so that the work isn't all on one person's shoulders makes a big difference. Sometimes that's just me, like, reading over something that a student wants to say to one of my colleagues and being like, you know, here's how that message will land. Here are the options that you'll have after that. And here's how I'll have your back in all of those options. And sometimes it's like, okay, y'all, well, we're all tired here, so go home and go lay down somewhere. You know, like, productivity is important to the academy, and like being esteemed, ranking, all the trappings of elitism are important to the academy. And sometimes I'm like, hey, how about you go home and lay down? And then we'll return to this tomorrow or 2 weeks from now, whatever you need to be well. I think those moments are interventions. So yeah, I think the balance is, sometimes I have the capacity for it and sometimes I don't, and being all right when I don't too, and saying, hey, I'm not going to do this work, but it needs to be done. Who got it?
Something that comes to mind is I did have a mentor even before I decided to pursue a graduate degree, because I was working in behavioral research in academia, and I was seeing a lot of the disparities between myself and my white counterparts. They were getting opportunities that I wasn't getting. So here I was maybe managing a project, and they were coming in as research assistants, and then they were surpassing me and getting masters and getting doctorates, and I wasn't getting the same kind of support. And I did have a mentor who said to me, be the spook. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she was referring to Sam Greenlee's book, The Spook Who Sat by the Door. So I'm seeing nods of recognition here, right? And for those of you who don't know this book, it's basically about a Black CIA operative who learns all of the CIA techniques and then goes ahead and uses it to challenge the CIA, right? And so I really do think that that's been somewhat of a model for me in terms of navigating through the doctoral program, navigating through academic systems. You take whatever you can learn, you leave what feels harmful or adapt what feels harmful, but learn as much as you can, and take what feels helpful, adapt what feels harmful, and then bring it to the communities and put it in your interventions for people who may not have had access to such interventions before, right? And so you're helping them navigate these systems. So the balance is use the system, take what's useful, and also trying to adapt what feels harmful in order to navigate it.
Yes, thank you so much. I already feel like my internal shift happening, hearing your words and feeling affirmed and like my experiences as well. So thank you. We're going to move on to our next question. And it's what inspires you to keep enacting change?
Oh, I can start with that one. I have a really clear vision of what I want the world to look like. And so that radical imagination, that hope, I've been creative all my life. And so it's not hard. Sometimes when I ask folks about that, like, well, what would the world be like if it loved you? People have a hard time conceptualizing that. And I just don't have a hard time with that. Like, I know. And so that's what inspires me, because I'm not at that world yet. Like, I don't live there. So if I want to live there, I'll do the parts that I have the capacity to do. And I watch people like y'all get up and do your parts, all the things that you're good at doing that help contribute to that world. So two pieces. I celebrate those wins. I celebrate the justices. I celebrate the joy. I bring joy into the space. And then I have compassionate commitment to it, because I know what the world looks like that I'm moving toward. And so I guess if I think about Afrofuturism and radical imagination and those constructs that a lot of our colleagues have used and thought about, like I'm crafty. So I know what it will take from me to get a little bit closer.
I think my answer is twofold. It was an intentional decision to remain in college counseling, because I often am inspired by the students that I work with, because they're so amenable to shifts and to change, and have a natural striving toward healing, which I think is very inspirational. And when you do this work, you need all the inspiration you can get, because it could get very heavy. Right. I think also what inspires me is that I am a product of immigrants, those who migrated by force, those who migrated for indentured servitude through the slave trade for a better life, right? And in order to migrate, you have to have the capacity to adapt and to lean into change. And I do really believe that those messages have been transmitted to me, not only from, my own lineage, but people who it's an all of my relations perspective, right? So all of these experiences are also part of my experience. So that is an intergenerational message, or an intergenerational leaning maybe toward doing this kind of work.
Yeah. I want to live. What inspires me to do the work is my desire to live, right? It's just that simple. And it's just that selfish, and it's also that collectivistic at the same damn time, because my living as a Black queer femme with disabilities, etc., my living and creating the change that would allow me to live with more breath, more joy, more wellness is going to require things that'll make the world safer and create more breath for others. And some of you all may have seen my TED Talk, Moving from Woke to Working for Black Futures, where I talked about my friend Heather, who didn't make it out of her grad program, and she would have turned 40 this year, at the end of January. She would have turned 40 if anti-Blackness didn't kill her. I wish to live. I wish for Black trans folks to live, Black femmes to live, Black kids to live, and to live fully. And I want to use what privileges I do have, what resources I do have, what skills that this degree and my mama and my daddy and community of Rockford, Illinois taught me in order to create more life and breath for others. And so it's just, it doesn't answering this question is is it an inspiration or is it an obligation? Is it just what is required to be taking in air and breathing air out in this space and time? But all of that moves me. And I really love Dr. Hargon's response about having the vision. I just know I know the world that I want to live in, and how juicy it could be, how delicious it could be. I'm co-creating it with others right now. And so the more we squat up and create it and see what it looks like and feels like, it's hell yeah, I want more of that. Get me closer to that. I want more people to have that. and let's expand the dream and like build the dream together, elasticize what's possible there. Like, let's do it.
I don't have too much to add. I just think sometimes it's hard to stay inspired because the work is tiring and draining and soul sucking at times. Especially, I think in the academy, like there's so much translational work that needs to happen to navigate like white spaces in particular. And so I think just to sum up what I've heard from others that I really resonated with is like this work is intergenerational. I really resonate with what Della was just saying about like, is it an obligation? And I think that's part of the values I was raised in of like, you are here to provide a better future than we experienced in the past. And this is your obligation for future generations. I think that there's this other piece of creativity and hope. And I think just like borrowing from abolitionist organizers of like, it might not be in this lifetime, but right now we're doing what we can to contribute. And I think that third part is the richness of relationships. So like whoever you are in community with, deepening that, like that's inspiring, like that's so life-giving. And when you are feeling weary and tired and drained, like knowing that others have your back and are still doing the work so you can take some time to rest. That's also something that like rejuvenates me to continue going, even when things feel hopeless, even when faculty say like, we heard your concerns, we'll wait till you graduate and like leave things as they are. So I think those pieces, yeah.
I love that. This idea of wanting to live, having a radical image of what you want to see, this community aspect, it's Kyrie's arm, and then thinking about kind of like how the youth, well, the youth, but like undergrads kind of inspire us and like kind of bring us back to like, okay, this is why I'm doing this. I absolutely love that. Speaking of, that's a perfect segue to our next question, which is, what advice would you tell your younger self in regards to being a change maker while living under the systems of oppression?
I guess I can kick us off on that one. I I don't have a lot to say to her except, it's just all I remember is like along the journey, a lot of voices telling me to do a lot of different things, a lot of different ways. And so I don't know, I just want to say I'm proud of you as you are. Like there are too many voices, you know, that have tried to move me, and yeah, I wouldn't want Della today to be adding to that, but just to be acknowledging the work. I think at different times in my journey, towards the PhD and towards doing the work of wellness, equity, love, liberation, survival, whatever, in all these different ways, at different stages and times and places that I was doing it, it felt like I knew I wasn't the first, but there also wasn't a blueprint and everything was a fight, right? Like the language wasn't there, the pathways, the framework, like there was frameworks that weren't respected yet, or that were still struggling to like put some respect on their name. I was like really trying to advocate to get them to be held and honored, or the way of doing like healing work that I do. I was really doing a lot of like labor to like have that be sort of recognized. And even though now a lot of it, I feel like there's some recognition and appreciation, and I feel really grateful for that. There wasn't that like necessarily like that pride, that support in the beginning all the time. And so I would just want to give that back to myself. And I think for folks who might be watching, who are doing something new and who are the first in some ways, I would want them to feel just like to like trust their inner knowing, and to like have your own back even harder, and yeah, just to stay gentle, because we need what you got, you know. And there may not be folks who get it right now, but like that's what I would want myself to know, that just keep going. I'm proud. You got this kind of vibe.
I think I wish my younger self knew a little bit more about how oppressive systems worked. And the reason why I say that is because I don't recall in my social networks talking about that overtly. And there was a lot of time spent sort of looking inward or internalizing things that I didn't know I was internalizing, right? And so I think that, the zeitgeist is such that we have all these platforms where this is talking about, they're talking about oppressive systems more explicitly. So I think that making the more implicit explicit is one of the things that I would tell my younger self. And I think one more thing that I would tell my younger self is that, there's a time to be small and there's a time to be an agitator, right? And sometimes it's very protective to make oneself smaller in order to survive. And sometimes you need to turn it up, right? And so it's okay, and that you have permission to show up in ways that feel safe and authentic to you.
This is a hard question. I think because I still feel very much in it, but I have had like, I guess 6 years to think about this a little bit. And what I would tell first year Andy is you don't need these external sources to validate your worth. You're enough. And by chasing after that, like it's a never ending, it doesn't lead to happiness. So I think for that, the systems of oppression that weren't created for us and meant to keep us down and meant to keep us against each other and building, like, as Dr. Hargons was saying, this love ethic. I think just like recognizing that like you're enough as you are, you have something to offer, and like you don't need to chase these folks' validation. And one thing that I'm grateful for that I found throughout grad school was models like Dr. Helen Neville, who like taught me about doing values-driven work. And so I don't think I would have done half the things I had done in grad school if I didn't learn to step into and embrace things that I enjoy doing, to have my research and my work be very, very personal, be very related to things that are like so meaningful to my heart and my values and those pieces. So like throw away your ideas of science and objectivity and just go for it. You have something to offer. Yeah.
I love this question because I just turned 40 in January and I'm enjoying middle age. Like I'm so excited about it. But it gave me a chance to reflect on where the psychology journey started for me. And so I went to Spelman for undergrad, and that means I already had the language of Black feminism. Like I knew Matrix of Domination and Intersectionality and Patricia Hill Collins and bell hooks, and like these were things I read and understood intellectually, but I hadn't yet reached praxis. And I was deeply invested in elitism at the beginning of my doctoral journey, which is why I pursued a doctorate, frankly, because I could have been a healer without it. Like, what was the point of that? But there was that deep investment in elitism that guided like how I worked, what I pursued, like all of the awards and all of the name recognition, my way of service in SCP, like all of that was at the time I didn't know it. I didn't have the language to like get to elitism. Like I understood like racism, sexism, and heterosexism and capitalism, all of those, but like I wanted to be better than other human beings. Like that's basically what elitism was. I was like, if there's gonna be a list, I'm gonna be at the top of it. Like that was my mode, right? And through community, I would always be willing to be generous and share, but the end game for me was to be the top. And that's just exhausting, you know? And so I think that I would invite younger me, like 2010 version of me, to divest from elitism, to recognize, to your point, be like your point, Andy, the inherent worthiness that being at the top of a fucked up hierarchy means absolutely nothing to your inherent worthiness. And so be excellent because it's what you are, as opposed to like because you want to beat other people or be the best, right? To be good at something, to dig deep into it, to understand the nuance and the richness, because it's a fun process and because you've always been curious, as opposed to because I want to have the most publications or I want to be the, you know, the president of the university, like always trying to get higher in a system or like win at the game of a system. I think if I could have divested from that a little bit earlier, I would have saved myself some health crisis, and given myself room to grieve when I needed to grieve and to unfold when I needed to unfold, to not be as poised as I thought I needed to be, all of these things. So I would say to that version of myself, which I still love, and she was remarkable and beautiful and all those good things, but that elitism wasn't going to buy her any protection. And I thought it would.
Wow. Thank you for sharing so honestly and so earnestly. I can really feel all your words, and I hope everyone else can too. We're going to move into our Q&A questions. So good evening, everyone. Thank you all for putting on this lovely event. I'm currently getting my hours for licensure as an RMHCI, but my work environment at the University of Miami is a very isolating, especially as a Black queer woman. I was wondering if any of you had the same experience before receiving your license. If so, how did you manage to seek/create community within the isolation?
I can say I've never actually been alone, but I felt lonely a lot of the times. And that was because I wasn't welcoming the power of community in the way that I could have at certain stages in my career. It was like, I just got to buckle down and get through it. And so I was like goal driven as opposed to like basking in the goodness that is to be with people, like to, you know, I think I felt like people were too messy. And so I was just like, I'll just do me over here and get what I need to get and be done. And so I think that I thought that would be protective, and it wasn't. It's exhausting. So I would say one way to create community, to seek community, is to think about the things you really enjoy doing and go do them. And to take the risk, which feels sometimes really risky, to start to make new friends, to introduce yourself to people, to love on people, to say hey, and to ask for what you need from people. And they can, you know, through the consent process, say yes or no, but that your needs are, you know, on the table for someone to meet, because that sharing community is about like mutually meeting each other's needs, that reciprocity, that, you know, that's what the love ethic feels like day to day. And if you don't ask for what you need, if you're terrified to ask for what you need because you feel like you might get rejected or abandoned, then people don't have an opportunity to meet you where you really are. And so going to do the things that you enjoy, asking for friendship, asking for relationship, honoring friendship, having reverence for that process and how scary it can be sometimes.
Yeah. And it's scary to be Black in Florida right now. It's scary to be Black and queer in this world anywhere, but I know in Florida right now, and so I'm just like feeling with you in that isolation, in that particular state, in this particular moment. Um, yeah. So, um, the only other thing I would add, I think, yeah, those were gems, bars that were just dropped, and the only other thing that comes to me is just the power of digital social community. Like, we are out here looking for each other every day online, and it's work. It's work to find the people who are your people, but they're looking for you. You know, like there are so many people who are like saying exactly what you're saying and looking for you. And so maybe it's in the physical spaces and getting out there and doing some of that is the way, but also like there's a huge, beautiful movement that's been moving for a long time in person, but now on this social world, like that is really trying to do this community healing work, that is trying to do collectivism, that is squatting up every day. And so there's the work of going out and getting it, whether in person or on social media, but then there's also doing whatever internal and reflective work you need to do to see what might get in the way of you being able to connect with folks. Because I think that's also an important sort of piece of it is in this moment, in this space that you're in this role that you're in, how much, yeah, what's the next piece of sort of self-work that allows you to do community and collective care a little bit better? Um, and are there folks like family members, loved ones who can help you to like see some of those pieces for yourself? That's been helpful for me. That's constantly helpful for me. I also just want I really want to just add some like respect and love on the conversation around elitism and the vulnerability that you shared around chasing that. I imagine if the chat was open, that people would be feeling that because, yeah, I agree with Emily that I really felt that and just want to honor that sharing, that knowledge, that invitation, and appreciate the modeling there.
Thank you.
I definitely, certainly also want to express my gratitude for that, because I think what I hear a lot in working with students is that they don't know that other people are struggling. They don't know that the people that they're looking up to have struggled similarly. And so, I can resonate with this sort of chasing of elitism. But then there's also the sad fact that there's also gatekeeping in our professions as well. And that's problematic. And I think if we can have more spaces where we can be vulnerable and really share really the ins and outs, the nuts and bolts of kind of going through this process and be transparent, I think that would shift people's feelings of moving and navigating these spaces. And I think, I'd also add that, it's really interesting being in this seat because I'm hearing all the people in isolation who do need community. So just know that they're out there, and that I also wanted to normalize the fact that the pandemic has made it increasingly difficult to connect with other people and know how to be social. It also has invited us to be creative in the way that we connect. So it's kind of twofold. It's really done some damage in terms of how I relate person to person, but also it has sort of forged a new way of connecting and community. So be creative. Just to second what Dr. Della said, be creative in how you find community and support as you navigate this process.
I just want to name, I'll never be a Black queer woman, but I do want to acknowledge that piece of creating community amidst isolation, and that creativity piece, but also the space of authenticity. I think I have benefited immensely from Black femmes in my life in particular who have hosted disorientations for students of color, and just that community knowledge is so valuable. And sometimes you do have to risk vulnerability and authenticity to open up those connections. And it's so scary, and it doesn't always go or land in the way that you hope. But I hope that even if there is instances or experiences of rejection, that you don't give up, because your people are still out there, whether online or in your working community. Yeah.
Thank y'all so much for that. There's actually a follow-up question to that, which asks, what professional and community organizations would you suggest listeners connect with, whether nationally or locally?
Wells Healing Center and BLFEM and Center for Healing Racial Trauma. Let's go.
Andy been through all of them, like, hey, y'all. I like to start local if possible. Like sometimes you need somebody to hug you. And so the local relationships make a big difference. Like I'm trying to get more of a local connection. So even if there are major organizations that have local chapters, start there. That way you can show up somewhere if you're comfortable doing that physically and see people and be held, hold space. So for me, that looked like the Urban League Young Professionals when I was like starting out in Lexington. And then I creating community with my research team and colleagues, stuff like that. I'm a part of all of the global majority psychological associations. So I want to be in community with Latinx folks and people of the Asian diaspora and people who are indigenous and people who are Middle Eastern and North African. Like, I don't know enough, I don't have as robust of a global perspective as I need to. So international stuff too. I like to get out of the United States of America as often as financially feasible for me. So creating community in different ways in different spaces, depending on what you have the capacity for. But I say start local. And those are usually, especially if you're going to be somewhere for a while, those relationships that sustain you. Somebody that could drop food by your house when you're sick, stuff like that makes a difference to me.
Yeah, I feel like everything that's been named is what I would say. So the perspective that I'm thinking about now is how you sort of vet new communities and people and places and the importance of that, and like knowing what you're going to a community for, knowing what you have to offer to a community. As Adrienne Marie Brown says, moving at the speed of trust when you're entering a new community and how important that is. Instead of like we go in place like, oh, I think I found my people because it's a this identity, this identity, this identity, or this role related group, and then you're like showing up and giving, and then whatever. So just move at the speed of trust as you find and move into these spaces, and know that like, I've gotten great recommendations from people about organizations that have been around for a long time in a community, and then I show up and it's like, oh, someone new took over 6 months ago, and it feels real different, right? And so just I am, I don't know, encouraging maybe in an intentionality and a pace that fits and feels right for you, and being just really attuned to how everything is operating in that space as you start to get into it, because things change, people change, and there's a lot of beauty out there. And so what's the like rubric or tool you're going to use to find out what are the ones that are for you? Because we only do have but so much capacity, especially for the folks who are holding identities that are minoritized and striving towards this degree. So yeah, those are my notes. But the Wells Healing Center is here for you.
Can I build on that? Because you just hit home for something. Having right size expectations for human beings makes a difference, especially if you feel desperate for care and connection. You can jump in and be like, yes, I'm fully open and pouring myself out to this. And it's like human beings gonna hume too. So So, human beings, especially in spaces that are like activist spaces, there's a lot of infiltration in spaces like that, and like sowing distrust and harm. There are a lot of people who experienced great trauma who haven't yet healed and processed that trauma. And so then that shows up in their interpersonal style, not because they're intending to harm, but because that's how they learn to protect themselves in those harm. So, just having right size expectations that just because the space is supposed to be about that life doesn't mean that people there won't also do things that are harmful sometimes. So understanding what type of repair works for you and asking for that, or what type of apologies work for you and asking for that, is just all a part of that, like whatever space you're in, humans are going to human. So like how do you repair relationships when there are ruptures too?
I can offer a bit of an extension outside of professional organizations and giving yourself permission to sort of have boundaries even in spaces that seemingly are supposed to have some familiarity or some affiliation, or you have some association with, is that community can also extend to things, so to beyond people, rather, I should say, right? And if we think about this, sort of how we are connected to nature and to land, I'm gonna refer back to the pandemic again, when a lot of people were not able to go outside, and what it was like when you finally went outside, right? And so how healing and sort of restorative it is that when you're in community with other people, we can also extend that to like the land around you. We're fortunate here in Florida, not fortunate with the politics, but fortunate with the weather, at least, where we have access to things that are restorative. We have sun, we have land, and know that these things have been around for centuries. Land, right, has been around for centuries, and it has the capacity to hold what you put down on it, right? So not only just community interpersonally, but community in the spaces that you occupy, community with the land that you occupy, and sort of recognizing the history of it and how it can be healing.
Yes, I really loved everyone's responses, especially about nature as our community partners, as our ally. That really resonated with me and everyone's words, honestly. And yes, thank you. So I do want to respect.
Can y'all hear me? Yeah, okay. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Adonia. So we just wanted to be respectful of your time, but also wanted to offer panelists options and opportunity to have like some closing remarks. Like if there wasn't a question that we didn't get to, or something that you want to share, or instilling some hope in folks that are here today, I wanted to give you all the space to do that. So whoever would like to start, and then me and Emily will do like last closing remarks depending on if sound issues are fixed.
I can say I welcome you into the academy if that's the space you really want to be in. But if it ain't, fuck it. Like it's all right. And I think we have to give permission, because sometimes folks don't realize their own autonomy, to be like, okay, even if this is your third year or fifth year, if it's not what you need, and it's not a healing or welcoming or useful and reciprocal environment for you, then go where you really want to be, and let that be your change. Sometimes you got to just divorce from the system and be like, hey, you weren't ready for me, and that's fine. I'm gonna go where I am or create what I need. I think Dr. Della, you're a great model in that. It's like, oh no, this don't work, and that's fine. I remember us having that conversation, like, okay, so be out. And I don't think everybody always says they're like, no, persist, go all the way through. And it's like sometimes those scars are open wounds if you try to persist in a system that tears you apart. For me, it's all right. It works for me, but it doesn't work for everyone. And I don't think we have to have the same thing or do the same thing to, to be change makers. There's so many ways you can make change. There's so many ways that you can have impact. Sometimes you just need to go home, be with your family, and that's your lane, and that's intimate justice, and sometimes you need to be somewhere else, and that's okay. So just having permission to know that, like, academia is an option of infinite options, not the only thing.
Okay, we're doing the stare off, so I'll go next. My last word is just, well, I love that y'all titled this a Changemakers Panel. And I think about change maker the same way I think about healer. I call myself a healer. I call myself a change maker, and I think of it the same way. It's like I'm a healer not because of the work that I do with others, but because I'm trying to heal anything inside me that would get in the way of me connecting with the person I'm sitting across from and moving through life with. And and toward the change maker, it's like what inside you is the next thing that needs change, and how are you fortifying yourself in order to move towards that, so that you can, yeah, move, co-create the change that is necessary for us to be well. And so just inviting that constant reflection of like the internal work alongside the external work that we do, and wanting to honor the necessity of that internal piece and the healing piece in order to be, I think, a change maker that has any endurance or sustainability, or a healer that has endurance and sustainability and impact. It's got to be that reciprocal process. And it takes a community. So I hope you have it. I hope you find your way towards it.
I think academia can strip you away of so much joy because it's so product focused. So what I might just say to close out is, like, change is slow going, and like it's ongoing and continuous. So like celebrate any and all wins. And I hope that you practice a loving kindness and self-compassion towards yourself, because we weren't meant to do this work alone. This system wasn't built for us. So like, if I sent out 3 emails today, that is good enough. Like, hooray. Let me turn off Outlook. And I think one thing that's really changed my whole relationship to being able to continue to stay here for now and get those check boxes done is recognize I deserve access to life outside of school, and treating this more like a job. So do the things that are fun, do dance, or get that meal that you want, or go for a walk and commune in nature and make friends with people. So I think like those pieces, live your life in all its richness, and know that this is a temporary, if you want it to be, job. Yeah.
Can I just add one piece to that? And it may take you more time, and that's fine. Like, it's okay to go at the pace of your own capacity.
I really respect this sort of sentiment of it's okay if academia isn't for you, because I think that if that was made more explicit, then people wouldn't feel beholden to suffer, right? So thank you for saying that. I would say be the spook, use this system for all of the advantages it can afford you, so that you can go back into your communities and do the healing work that you feel is needed. I also encourage people to, as Andy said, insert pleasure and play into this experience, because it is known through research that when you do experience pleasure, you will work longer and harder on the difficult things, right? Not my words, research words, right? I think, and also don't be afraid to lean into other healing practices, because I think that we are taught through this institution that there is one way that is the right way. And we've survived for generations for a reason, because the people, your own indigeneity has given you tools and things to survive, right? And I think that if you have the opportunity to connect to those things, certainly you will continue to survive and thrive. So just lean into the things that maybe would be organic and innate and indigenous to you, and use that for your healing and to navigate these spaces.
That was so beautiful. I'm taking all of that in. And I really appreciate just y'all agreeing to be on this panel. This panel was also for me, myself, as a change maker in academia. And I was like, ooh, let me hear from the people that be doing it. So I really appreciate y'all being here, taking the time, and just dropping gems and opening up the space. The fact that you don't have to be in academia if it's not for you. So I love that. I'm gonna hold that with me as I proceed through this program. So I really appreciate y'all for coming. Me and Emily both do. And the recording will be available, I think, on SAS's YouTube or or SCP's YouTube if you want to watch it at a later date. But I'm respectful of y'all time. I really appreciate y'all coming, and that's all we've got for you today.
Can you all hear me now? Okay, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your energy and the labor that you're putting into this. Thank you to Cherese. This was her baby, and I was so happy to be able to support her in making this come true. So thank you for all your labor, Cherese, and all your love. Really appreciate it.